contradictions, and way forward. This conference is being organized by the Department of Economics, Government Degree College, Chanchulgooda, in collaboration with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Open University. Now, we begin the inaugural session with the welcome of the guests on the dais. I respectfully invite Professor Ganta Chakrabarty sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, and President of this inaugural function. Esteemed Justice P. Sudarshan Reddy sir, former Justice of the Supreme Court, and keynote speaker, Professor Prabhat Patnaik, Professor of Emeritus, Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU, New Delhi, who is joining us through Zoom. Guest of honor, Professor G. Pushpa Chakrabarty Madam, Director Academic, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and Professor Chandra Mukherjee Madam, Principal Government Degree College, Chanchulgooda. She will join very shortly. And Seminar Director, Professor Patta Venkateshwarlu, to kindly grace the dais. We extend a warm and cordial welcome to our esteemed dignitaries. As a mark of our respect, I request Dr. Yadagari Kambhampati to kindly present a sampling to our Chief Guest, Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy sir. Thank you, Giri. Sir, we shall now pay our respectful floral tribute to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the principal architect of Indian Constitution. I request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly offer floral tribute. you, sir. I will now hand over the session to the president of the event to conduct the procedure. Thank you.
Good morning, friends. Respected Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu, a distinguished jurist and a man with integrity and the true guardian of constitutional values in India, who is here with us to launch this conference as chief guest. And another very distinguished personality of the country and a famous economist and a rare intellectual voice, deeply committed to the people, principles, and social justice. Professor Prabhat Patnaik is waiting to deliver his keynote speech on this occasion over Zoom. And other dignitaries on the dais, Dr. Bhatta Venkateshwarlu, Professor Pushpa Chakrapani, Professor Krishna Reddy, Department of Economics. This seminar is a kind of a rare experiment and a rare kind of exercise we are doing here. First time Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University is organizing such a seminar in collaboration with a local college. I welcome all the dignitaries, paper presenters, panel speakers, and teaching staff from both Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University and Government Degree College, Chenchalguda. Very particularly, I welcome students of Chenchalguda Degree College, media, and other friends. I would like to invite you all to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University campus. For next two days, you will be here to discuss, deliberate, and come out with fresh thoughts on old economic policies, economic liberalization concept, as well as its impact, and that's vis-a-vis with Constitution. I said old because it is 35 years old experiment. Let me begin the story of this seminar. This seminar did not emerge. It did emerge accidentally. It began with a simple and powerful idea brought by Dr. Bhatta Venkateshwarlu from Chenchalguda Degree College. He is lecturer economics over there. And he approached us with a purpose and a proposal to collaborate to organize this event. To be very honest, this was new for us, as I said earlier. We had seminars with national, international organizations, universities, institutions, UGC, Commonwealth of Learning, and several other. But a person from a local degree college is proposing a seminar is, just I told him I'll definitely discuss with my colleagues and I'll come back. I discussed with my colleagues. In fact, honestly, I asked for the venue. No, we said we just don't hire our venues like that. We collaborate and we let us organize this conference jointly. So that is the idea he brought, and finally it conceived as the today's event. And we have another a kind of selfish kind of idea. I mean, maybe because he is inviting. I mean, this entire seminar is with very invited kind of lectures, and he has invited people who is working on this thing over 30 years. And of them, there are some economists, very renowned professors, teachers, intellectuals, and the person who is fighting against the whole economic injustice for all 3-4 decades. Professor Prabhat Patnaik is delivering this lecture. We felt it is honor to us. And none other than Justice Sudarshan Reddy is launching this. So keeping all this and the dignitaries and speakers he has invited, by looking at that, we strongly felt it is honor to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. Because the entire seminar is going to reflect on and around Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's constitutional thought as well as his economic ideas. So we felt, it is a great kind of honor to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. And we thought the occasion is also very suitable. Since last 2 years, of course, this is our second edition of Social Empowerment Week. We are celebrating April as Empowerment Month. And particularly, we have designed last year and even now also, a week-long, 10 days long program, and we named it as Social Empowerment Week. Last year and even this year also, the Social Empowerment Week is combination of memorial lectures, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and Babu Jagjivan Ram. Apart from that, we organize different kind of events on this occasion. Particularly, this time also, yesterday we had very interesting kind of a symposium on reservations, constitution, inclusiveness, and challenges. And we had invited very distinguished professors as well as social activists to discuss threadbare on that issue. And today, we thought, this definitely matches to our, agenda. And we immediately agreed to partner with Venkateshwarlu's team as well as Chenchalguda College. And today we are here on this occasion. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, as all of you know, is the first open university of the country. We invented a new path to reach to the unreached in this country, particularly in the field of higher education. For the last 45 years, we are contributing to the society, not only to reach the unreached, to include the excluded in the mainstream, and to empower through all of them through education. So at B.R. Ambedkar Open University, our vision is deeply rooted in Baba Saheb's idealism. In India, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar means the Constitution. Ambedkar means social justice. Ambedkar means social empowerment. And Ambedkar means, for us, education. He democratized, he designed a program to democratize the higher education and democratize the education in this country. Friends, for us, education is not merely about awarding the degrees. We do not just give the degrees, we spread values. We cultivate minds. We build social responsibility. We contribute to social empowerment. Keeping this mission in mind, we made the seminar part of our social empowerment week. We often told, in fact, India is growing, India is shining, India is progressing. But today, I want to ask, whose growth is this? ये किसका साथ है और ये किसका विकास है? Why we are asking this question? And in fact, the thematic construction of this seminar by Patta Venkateshwarlu made me to ask these questions. After 35 years of economic reforms, what is happening in this country? And how the growth is really influencing us? And is this growth aligned with Constitution? That is the basic question of this seminar. But that is the crux of this entire discussion. And he has invited, of course, several people. He explained that. At this point, what we felt is we must step back and reflect. It has been more than 3 decades and 3.5 decades since the economic reforms began. We have seen expansion of market and we have seen major policy changes, and we have redefined the responsibility of states. In this process, sometimes quietly, the voices of the Constitution seems to have been pushed to the background, not openly, but gradually, discreetly, it is happening. Through our experiences and through our academic engagements and through our social encounters, we have seen how policies affect people, how contradictions emerge at grounds. And from these reflections, we felt this is the right moment to discuss about the impact of social economic policies on Indian Constitution and Reserve. As we move forward, I don't want to, give detailed narration, but just to look at, I'll take one example of education. Of course, education, agriculture, tribal resources, social movements, people's movements, everything is affected. On a whole, Constitution has to change. It's very important commitments also sometimes. Just I'll give a small example of higher education field in India. Before economic policies, there was around 2000, 2005, very few, like around 20 private universities are there in this country. But by 2021-22, the number swelled to 470 private universities. And again, they're driven by policy shifts favoring self-finance institutions, and state private universities grow from 19 to 90 by 2006 to 2008. And now we have 473 private universities, new post-economic reform institutions. Almost 500 private institutions have come up. Unfortunately, just in the last year, there were mushroom of 140 private institutions, both universities and deemed to be universities. At this juncture, what is happening exactly in higher education, particularly regarding funding of public institutions? I would like to tell from this dais, till 31st March, all open universities are waiting for at least every year they used to give 1 crore rupees to all public open university, state public open university. We were waiting and waiting. At night 11:30, we got a message that we are not giving any money to public open university. Very interestingly, I spoke to the higher officers there, and one officer is saying, yes, for some private universities also we are giving 20 crores, 30 crores, 100 crores. But unfortunately, we could not, give at least 1 crore rupees to public university. This is the state of affairs, after the economic liberalism. What way it is concerned to your constitution? Fortunately or unfortunately, constitution has promised us free education and inclusivity and equal opportunity to all the people. Equal opportunity means, for me, equal education access also. Equal education opportunities also. Equal rights also. And the right to education also. But this is, here, our constitution, probably our judiciary, and probably our entire administration has compromised. At this juncture, I strongly feel this conference is going to offer a new dimension to judiciary also, and constitution in particular, in general. So, I hope we are going to bring our collective ideas. We have a lot of experiences also. Resources are captured by markets. Forests are captured by markets. If you look at Odisha and Chhattisgarh, now entire the market mafia occupied the lands, resources of people. And people resistance and movements are crushed by putting a deadline. By this time, by this period, you have to withdraw your movement and your protest or your resistance. Otherwise, so it's like America is threatening Iraq. Same kind of situation is prevailed in some of the areas. We have seen that in farmers' laws. We have seen the same kind of situation with tribals, Adivasis, and others. So, by saying these words, I am not, against the economic reforms or against the government's efforts or against the constitutional, whatever the kind of standpoint. But let us be clear, growth without justice is incomplete. And development without dignity is dangerous. And market without morality is blind. The visible hand of the market must ever overpower the visible conscience of our constitution. The invisible hand is overpowering now, probably influencing, that kind of sense we are getting by seeing the developments. Let us hope this seminar become more than a discussion. Yes, it will be not a routine seminar by inviting papers, read the papers and go off. We planned this seminar as a discussion point, a forum for discussion. And let this seminar become more than a discussion, not just discussion. Let it become a reflection. Let it become a responsibility. And let us ensure that the economy serves for the people, not the other way around. Before I conclude, let me recall the words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Cultivation of minds should be the ultimate aim of human existence. I hope let this seminar not only generate ideas, but also cultivate minds and show us the right direction. Thank you, Venkateshwarlu, and thank you, Sir Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu is like, our elderly old man of our house, our university. Whenever we have some important idea, whenever we need an important, direction, whenever we need a handhold, we just rely on Sudarshan Reddy Garu. He's just call away to us, every time whenever we call him, he'll be here. It is appropriate to have Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu and Professor Prabhat Patnaik Garu in today's morning's event. I'll stop here. Now, I request Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu to deliver his inaugural address and launch this seminar. Thank you.
Professor Ganta Chakrapani, President of this meet. Prabhat Patnaik, today's keynote speaker in absentia. Professor G. Pushpa Chakrapani, Dr. Venkateshwar, Director of the seminar. Professor Krishna Reddy, Co-Director and Department of Economics, B.R. Ambedkar Open University. Distinguished guests in the audience. My dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Let me express my gratitude to the organizers of seminar, and in particular Professor Chakrapani, at whose instance I stand before you to say a few words. Yesterday evening I was exchanging notes with Professor Chakrapani, telling him in advance, perhaps tomorrow I may not be present to formally inaugurate this conference, as I was not doing well. Well, in the sense, little indisposed of. Some peculiar problem of sinusitis troubling me. And anyhow, thank you, Professor Chakrapani, for relegating me to the Margadarshak Mandal. But I refuse to oblige you. I'll continue to associate myself with you and all of you who are sitting here. The topic is very interesting. Economic reforms and the Indian Constitution. I mean, do I understand that economic reforms began only in the year 1980 or ever since the Constitution is framed, or even much before the Constitution was framed? Therefore, I would like to say few words on the topic that Indian Constitution is the idea of socialism. Maybe it sounds a little outdated, doesn't matter. It has its own history, how we have grown, how we have evolved, how it is intertwined with the idea of freedom. Professor Chakrapani was telling, Ambedkar means A, B, C, D. One word he did not say because must have escaped his attention. Ambedkar means economic democracy. In fact, that phraseology, economic democracy, dominated the proceedings of the Constituent Assembly. And eloquent speakers on that subject were both Baba Saheb and Gandhiji. Apart from various distinguished persons in the Constituent Assembly, that is our founding fathers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are assembled here at a very critical stage, not only for the nation we are passing through, but also for the whole world. We see and hear. It's not a prepared text. I was just jotting down the notes to prepare my speech. In the meanwhile, I became unwell. I thought I'd proceed and talk whatever little bit that is possible. I don't know what is the time at my disposal. No problem. That's very dangerous. Don't ever do that to any speaker. That's why I said 20 minutes. No, doesn't matter. I'll see. I'll carry as long as I can. And the moment I feel uncomfortable, I'll ask him. No, couldn't. We see and hear on daily basis how lies the masquerade as history and how genocide is presented as self-defense. What to say about the wiping of a civilization, one of the oldest civilizations on the earth? Of course, wiping of civilization is called by the warmongers. I don't have to name anyone. It would be better we speak less about justice, because Professor made a comment, the judiciary also is compromised. I would make a little correction. Judiciary is not compromised. The way they interpret the Constitution, they think that is the correct way of interpreting the Constitution. And whatever we did previously was an incorrect approach to reading the Constitution. That's how I understand. Because law has been reduced to mere legality. In turn, legality has become an exclusive tool to subvert justice. Even our silences and whispers about a democratic dialogue are being criminalized. The thin line between the protest and the terrorist and extremist activity is being further blurred. That is the stage at which we assemble here to discuss this critical issue. Coming back to the subject, how I have understood the topic: Socialism and the Indian Constitution. In fact, that is the title of the book written by Professor Prabhat Patnaik. Many of them are interested in economics. It is a seminar by the economic department. Must have read this book. It's a very small book, about 130 pages. Right from Karachi Resolution of 1931. Hope none of you are present here mind my making a mention city which is part of a broker nation and your enemy nation. Karachi at that time when I am talking was part of India, where the Congress ultimately was held and deliberated upon the future economic and political policy of the country. I do not know whether we can mention even the names of the towns which are in our neighborhood. There are many, just now Professor was saying, who believe under the form of meaning that socialism as a philosophy and as an idea has nothing to do with the constitution. It's a matter of public policy left to the discretion of the elected government as to how it proposes to manage its economic affairs. But I'm an old-timer. I do not subscribe to that view. The idea of socialism is built into the Constitution. Right from the objective resolutions, that was the first resolution in 1946, introduced by Panditji, later little modified, which became part of preamble. All of you know what is that modification and whose instance. The expression fraternity was missing in objective resolution, introduced by Panditji. It later found its way into the preamble at the instance of Baba Sahib. Preamble itself speaks about equality. It speaks about justice. Social, economic, political. Political is the last. First is the social and followed by the economic. And just now I said the terms of economic democracy dominated the proceedings. There was a constant debate on that. What do you mean by economic democracy? Let's take a bird's eye view on the idea of socialism in the Indian Constitution, which inevitably leads us to speak about Nehru and his contribution. I thought at one stage, this is becoming a lecture on Nehru. I did not intend to deliver a lecture on Nehru. I wanted to speak on the economic reforms. But if you speak about the economic reforms, how can you ignore the First Amendment to the Constitution? First Amendment, no doubt, was a comprehensive one, dealing with the restrictions of freedom of speech and expression, etc. But essentially, an economic reform where Jamindari abolition was the key point. The content of the party's socialism, that's party when I refer to All India Congress Committee, that then existed, but not the present All India Congress Committee about which I'm speaking. Then immediately we speak about the Karachi resolution, where Gandhiji himself was present, and the resolution was drafted none other than by Panditji. It speaks about the reforms like the key industries, the services, mineral resources, railways, waterways, shipping. They thought they must be required under the control of the government. Though I did not find the word nationalization in the resolution, but this was the purpose of clear. The resolution called unspecifically for land tenure reform, treating the issue gingerly, in line with Gandhi's policy of a unified effort against British rule, unhindered by intra-party conflicts. Others in the party, like the Congress Socialist Party, which consisted of very eminent personalities, Acharya Narendra Dev, Jai Prakash Narayan, Dr. Lohia, Aruna Asif Ali, and various distinguished personalities. That was formed in 1934, of which Nehru was a supportive non-member. Had no such inhibitions about the way in which Gandhiji was proposing the reform. Among its objectives were the elimination of princes and landlords and other classes of exploiters without payment of any compensation. The whole dispute about the First Amendment was, what do we mean by adequate compensation? A series of cases, right from Bella Banerjee. I do not want to mention the names of those cases and bother all of you perhaps who have never read those judgments. There was no occasion, rightly so, for all of you to read those judgments. All this is captured in a document, a resolution on fundamental rights and economic and social change. Report of 45th Indian National Congress, Bombay. It was published summarizing the context and the meaning and purport of Karachi Resolution of 1930. But actually the collision between democratic rights and the social revolution sharply escalated between 1951 and 1954. Those were the days when we were talking about the large-scale land reforms and the question of payment of compensation. A number of writ petitions were filed in various high courts, ultimately culminating in the judgments of the Supreme Court, where almost all the laws dealing with the Zamindari abolition were struck down by the Supreme Court, including the cases with regard to taking over the routes, not really nationalization, some routes where private bus operators used to fly their buses. That was the case from UP, Sagir Ahmed. These are all the factors which really continue to bother the government and more particularly Prime Minister. There was a committee, very interesting, Congress Working Committee's subcommittee on the Constitution, which attacked the judiciary's power to issue prerogative writs to enforce the fundamental rights. And that would have taken from the jurisdiction of the courts over compensation disputes. The curbing of the court's writ power might have been included in the Fourth Amendment, came into force on 27th April 1955, and the Nehru vetoed it. He said that is how the Constitution is understood by the judiciary. we will clarify what it really means and supply whatever that was lacking in the provisions of the Constitution, which we could not comprehend at that time, and make things clear. Therefore, let us not indulge in this adventure of taking away the powers of the judiciary to issue appropriate writs to enforce the fundamental rights. These were the visionaries. What could have been its result if the Supreme Court was divested of its power to enforce the fundamental rights? Had they listened to that subcommittee appointed by the Congress Working Committee? And in fact, there was a resolution and which was vetoed by said no, we will not do that. He did not use the term basic structure, but he said without altering the Constitution. He would explain what it means, how we can still do it. The first amendment was passed by the Provisional Parliament on May 10th, 1951. Provisional because, most of you remember, Constituent Assembly itself was functioning as Parliament, was discharging two duties. Parliament was not constituted since there were no general elections held. The bill was referred to Select Committee at the instance of the Prime Minister. While speaking on the bill, Nehru made one of his many historic speeches. And it was quite a lengthy one about which I did not wish to say much and bother all of you here. But nonetheless, we will be failing in our duty. We don't refer to certain prominent pronouncements made by him about the subject which we are discussing today after more than perhaps 70 years. He refers to the findings of the Select Committee. Now there is no practice of members adding their dissenting notes to the Select Committee. You may differ, but the resolution would be by the Standing Committee resolves or the Select Committee resolves. Sometimes they say by majority, sometimes they don't even say that. But Nehru was also the chairman of the Select Committee. He said no, dissenting notes must be permitted. Everybody must be allowed to record their dissent and the reasons for them. That's how the debates took place in those days. He says the committee consisted of many honorable members of this House, holding a variety of opinions and pressing them quite rightly, with all the force at their command. And it was our wish and attempt in this committee to come as far as we could to a large measure of common understanding, because it was a serious matter. These are the words of Nehru. And the amendment of the Constitution is always a serious. And we try to find common ground, how the consensus was built and what democracy really means. And may I say that in effect, we did found a great measure of common ground. And even though there are a number of minutes of dissent attached to this report, I think that the common ground we found in the course of our deliberations was far greater than might be expected by an unwary reader of these minutes of dissent. Having said that, he makes an important statement. Because the leaders of that era never sure, 100% sure as to what they were proposing and what they were saying. They always entertained a self-doubt. Are we right? Are we doing the right thing? Are we 100% correct? These are the questions that continuously bothered them. In that process, Nehru makes a statement. I cannot say, of course, that what I put before the House is perfect in all respects. Perfect constitutional amendment bills we see only today, which will be introduced in the morning, and by the afternoon, the constitutional amendments are passed. We have reached a stage where the constitutional amendments are carried on by voice vote, altering the basic document of the country. Because there is no perfection in such matters, opinions may differ, and where there is an attempt to find a middle way, often there is certain dissatisfaction on either side. But I think that the report does represent a very hard and very continuous attempt to find as good language as could possibly be. Why good language? Whether Nehru was able to see what kind of language could be used on the floor of the parliament. He could foresee and visualize as to what degeneration that can take place in the parliamentary debates. He laid emphasis on the good language. We were able to arrive not only the object, not only the purposes, not only the nature of the amendment, but the language which we have employed to give expression to our intentions without doing violence to any part of any intention of the Constitution. He made one statement. I don't read, it is a lengthy lecture running into 40 pages, delivered extempore, not a written text. And a small interjection by one of the members that you are talking about the fundamental rights. That's all the interjection. Then he stops there and tries to reply what is his understanding of the fundamental rights. We feel that we were not going beyond it, but rather attempting to clarify the correct constitutional position. He went on to say, this is very important. Then we talk, on the one hand, in our directive principles of policy, I was coming to that of removing inequalities, in raising people up in every way, socially, educationally, economically. Reducing the distance which separate groups or classes of individuals from each other. We cannot separate them entirely. We cannot make a fool. I don't know why he said that. We cannot make a fool a wise man or make a wise man a fool. These are not my words, that's what he said. Individuals are clever or not clever. Individuals are tall or short, thin or fat, and nobody tries to have similar rotundity either in the mind or body. But we do wish to give the same opportunities. same opportunities to everyone so that he can take full advantage of those opportunities and grow to the full stature as far as the stature allows it. And if anything comes in the way of achieving this, we shall remove that. We shall remove that obstacle. It is not an easy matter. It is not a thing to be done quickly and suddenly, where we have a vast population. That was the complexity of the situation. He proceeds to say now to get rid of, in order to build, not only to give opportunity to each individual in India to grow, but also to build up a united nation where each individual does not think so much of his particular group or caste, but thinks of the larger community. Then he talks about the directive principles of state policy that are laid down in the Constitution, that of course we cannot do and must not do. On the other hand, if we talk only about those directive principles, ignoring existing facts, then we may talk logic and we may talk fine sense, even in a way, but it has no relation to facts and becomes artificial. It becomes slightly adventurous and therefore not realistic enough. He said somewhere, refers to those people who never participated in the constitution making, but were delivering sermons in the house. He says, I'm glad that some of my honorable friends interfered. They said that it is a matter of fundamental right. Does it mean that a matter of fundamental right ought to be allowed to lead not only to confusion, but grave danger to state? Surely not. I say nothing, not a single fundamental right can survive grave danger to the state. And I wish the House would be clear about this and realize the times we live in this country and in other countries. I do not wish to talk about American Revolution or the French Revolution. Many things have happened since then. It is an old thing that some of my honorable friends not merely have taken umbrage at this amendment in the Constitution and hold up to us that the Constitution is something sacred. Constitution is something sacred, therefore we stand at the entrance of the Parliament, bow our head to it one day, and the other day we take the Constitution on our head and make the Constitution a headless one, or read heads down. I have to say that is not the way to respect it. By merely describing the Constitution as sacred and as sacrosanct is not good enough. Constitution is to be respected. Some of them or their colleagues outside this house have openly stated that the first thing they would do if they come to power is to scrub this Constitution and put an end to it. There's a curious position to adopt what they speak outside and what they speak opposing the amendment. This parliament has to be scrapped, has to be scrapped according to them, and something new has to come into it. Here there will be wage. We want to do is not a change, but amend it slightly, but then the position only very few members. Some members say Constitution is sacred and is sacrosanct character. And he says a Constitution must be respected. If there is to be any stability in the land, a Constitution must not be made the plaything in some fickle thought or fickle fortune. That is true. At the same time, we have in India a strange habit of making gods of various things, adding them to our innumerable pantheon, and having given them our theoretical worship, doing exactly the reverse. If we want to kill a thing in this country and deify it, that is the habit of this country largely. He says, surest thing to kill anything good in this country is to call it a sacred. Said you, because his way of putting the things, because the language in those days was not that coarse enough. Then he speaks about the collapse of the German Constitution. Then he speaks about collapse of Spanish Constitution. Why it happened? He makes analysis. We live in a haunted age. I do not know how many honorable members have that sense and that feeling. We in this country or in the world of ghosts and apparitions surrounding us. Ideas, passions, hatred, violence, perpetration for war, many things which you cannot predict, nevertheless, which are made dangerous than other things. How could Nehru realize in 1951 the way things are happening in 2026? When he refers to the crux of Article 31, that is exactly the subject matter of discussion of this seminar. Principally to the abolition of democratic system and the like, which have been basis obstructing the program of the country for a long. And he linked it, the democratic abolition and the land issue in Asia, to that of food shortage. While making analysis, the reason for food shortage in this country, he linked it to the land reform. Perhaps he was never trying to answer what Professor Chakrabarty said, that the security ultimately lies in a stable economic system, not in the knockouts, nor in anything else. If there is a lack of peace between the vast agrarian population, and then they have no security. We have witnessed it. We have experienced in this very stage how the agrarian unrest led to a mass movement fighting for the equality. The system cannot continue. It just does not matter what your fundamental rights might say, what your constitution might say, or what your court might say. Then you arrive at a revolutionary situation which ignores all these things, including your constitution. Therefore, that it is not the right way. We have to consider the reality and really just put an end to the big Jamindari system, reform our land systems. A balance is to be created, that's what I say. Then another important, there were 17 constitutional amendments. All of them are not that important for India. Fourth amendment again concerned the land reforms. And the last one, very interesting, on 5th December 1961, Supreme Court held that taking the lands under Kerala Agrarian Relations Act of 1961 was not protected from the judicial review. In spite of constitutional amendment, First Amendment and Fourth Amendment. The bill went on 21st September, the joint calamity. There were deliberations. And can you imagine? The government had absolute majority in the House. I'm talking about 1963, 28th April. The Joint Select Committee report was supposed to be introduced in the House. Some of the members were attending too. Electing some committee members. Then from the government side, whoever was moving that bill, they said, all of them are busy, their lobbies have to be cleared, they have to come for taking of the discussion. Then Minu Masani and other Swatantra Party members, together with a couple of them, insisted no. Either you introduce the bill, even for introducing the bill, you take the view of the House. Then there was no majority found. The bill, constitutional amendment bill, could not be introduced. Speaker readily agreed with them. Who was the speaker? Sardar Hukum Singh, Speaker of Lok Sabha. Then the government pleaded for a special session to reintroduce the bill on 27 May 1964. The deliberations were on. Then enters C. Subramaniam into the House and makes an announcement. It's end of an era. Panditji is no more. While his pet legislation was being deliberated in the House, that was relating to estates abolition. What was an estate in Tamil Nadu was not an estate in Kerala. These are all the problems that arose on account of the states reorganization. That's for some other day. I don't want to go. He himself drafted the statement of objection reasons. And he said the legislation must be protected. The Constitution Amendment Bill was ultimately passed, it had become the law, the Supreme Court upheld it, and the States Parliament. When I talk about the reforms, I talk the reforms about that have taken place, of course, until 1990. We know what are the reforms that have come. The idea of socialism you find in the Constitution itself in the directive principles of state policy. Baba Sahib says, the draft Constitution framed only provides a machinery for the government of the country. It is not a contrivance to install any particular party in power, and less being done in some countries. Who should be in power is left to be determined by the people, and it must be the system is to satisfy the test of democracy. But whoever captures power will not be free to do what he likes with it. In the exercise of it, you will have to respect these instrument of instructions. You described the directive principles of state policy, which provides for distributive justice as the instrument of instructions. And he speaks about economic democracy. Then asked him, another constitutional scholar, perhaps the best available commentator on the Indian Constitution. He says, Indian Constitution is first and foremost a social document. The fundamental rights and directive principles had their root deep in the struggle for independence, and they were included in the Constitution, the hope and expectation that one day the tree of true liberty would bloom in India. The rights and the principles thus connect India, future and past, adding greatly to the significance of the inclusion in the Constitution and giving strength to the pursuit of the social revolution. He said that is the document which provides for the social revolution. And I just mentioned the names of those cases and incidentally names of those judges, including Chief Justice Chandrachud, not the present one, his father, what he said in Keshwanda, what Justice Matthew said, what Justice Krishna Iyer said, what Justice Chinnapareddy said about the idea of the Constitution directive principles of state policy. Krishna Iyer has gone to the extent of saying that the aim of socialism is the distribution of the material resources of the government. As such, as the way subserve common good. In another judgment, Sanjeev Kaur, Justice Chinnapareddy said, egalitarian principle is implicit in every directive principle. The law ought to be designed so as to promote broader egalitarian social goods and economic justice for all. Justice Matthew also said same thing. And Chandrachud, Chief Justice, said the synthesis between fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy by giving the former a pride of place and the other later a place of development. Together, not individually. They form the core of the Constitution. Together, not individually. They constitute its true conscience. He used this very interesting word. The freedom of the few will be at the merely of many, and all the freedom will vanish. In order, therefore, to preserve their freedom, the privileged few must part with a portion of their freedom and their right to property. That's how the directive principles were read. Between 1970s and 80s, it's a great period for the Supreme Court, where all these people adorned the Supreme Court. I do not know how they could have been described by the present regime. We know how they could have been described. What they would have said about them, not difficult to know. Perhaps not urban accent, but as openness. That would have been the designation, the situationality, the situational, Justice Matthew, Justice Chandrachud would have received had there been the present regime in the office. And ultimately, all of you know, after the First and Fourth Amendment in 1955, All India Congress Committee session was in Nagpur, I think, where they have adopted the socialistic pattern in the society as the motto, national goal. But one conundrum. The same power to amend the constitution, how it was used misleadingly. According to the constitution, to restrict the judiciary, say reach over legislation affecting property rights to use, an unintended consequence. The government could less use judges as whipping boys for its own failures in implementation. Although civil servants still could be still used to a lesser degree. The Congress and its state governments are not referring to level. That's the beauty of the Congress Party always. And its state governments thus were exposed as the principal impediments to the full implementation of land reforms during the Nehru years, as they would be under his successor, Lal Bahadur and Mehra Gandhi. None of this resolved the conundrum which had baffled the party and the government during Nehru years. Coming back, I'll conclude. We are going to be barely the second time. How we should be the same. Professor Patnaik directly deals with this issue in his book on democracy and constitution and social. He says the book details how the Congress and India so and so on. So ultimately he says, now we are our nationalism is now reduced to GGP nationalism, quote unquote. This is his expression. It further examines, the book further examines how policies adopted in the mid-1980s onward encouraged the rise of domestic corporate and financial oligarchy and hegemony of capital over labor and the dominance of capitalism over the rest of the society. The author also discusses, hopefully is a reason behind the reply, if I'm wrong. The author also discusses these factors that contributed to the growth of the market and the emergence of neoliberalism, and ultimately the degeneration of neoliberal order into a new form of fascism. And he concludes, I couldn't resist to quote this paragraph. I quote this paragraph and leave the matter. It is directly relevant to the seminar. I quote, description of fascism attributed to Mussolini, because we have various facets of fascism. Namely, a merger of a state and the corporate power. That was Mussolini's brand of fascism. Merger of the state and the corporate. He says that is a fine thing, ultimately to be achieved. Gets realized to an unprecedented extent. In the state in India supports the corporates, especially the crony capitalists. These are not my words. I'm already in trouble and don't attribute it. Especially in the crony capitalists, in the name of building up infrastructure that would keep up the growth momentum. Corporates in turn make huge funds available to the Hindutva elements in power, so that they can remain powered by buying up legislators from the opposing political parties, buying votes, rigging elections, and mounting massive advertisements. All this occurs while repressive organs of the state, not to mention the Hindutva thugs, are used to terrorize opponents and silence critics. Unquote. This is how he concludes his thesis, Democracy and Socialism, the Indian Constitution. The very fact I have quoted this, I have approved it. One word about Parliament. Because the Nehru said, everything must be deliberated here, everything must be discussed here. And everyone should have an opportunity to speak. And even joint parliamentary committees minutes were reduced into writing where the dissent was allowed to break. And the dissent was also read in here. Parliament has immense power and functions within the bounds of a written constitution. True, at any time, in theory, the assertion's accuracy as regards Parliament service to seamless web depend upon the time it was made. This is not the Pandit's, this is what I have noted. The first speaker, D.V. Maulanka, built Parliament as an independent institution not to be seen as an extension of government or of the party. Ideas running counter to a number of nations' cultural traits. Nehru wholeheartedly supported him. Congress party dominance gave the body solidity, but its broad spectrum composition also assured that a wide variety of views will be heard. The vocal is weak, opposition parties and the independent spirit in the public accounts and estimates committee contributed to this democratic functioning, even under a dominant prime minister like the Nehru. As important was Maulankar's intention to foster a spirit of tolerance, for he said, I quote, this is Maulankar, if we go merely by majority, we shall be fostering the seeds of fascism, violence and revolt, unquote. This is what Maulankar said, highlighting the importance of the opposition in the parliament, sitting as the speaker in his chair. As important was Maulankar's intention to foster a spirit of tolerance. For, and he said, if we go merely by majority, we shall be fostering the seeds of fascism, violence, and revolt. Parliament and the Nehru supported a powerful and independent judiciary, even while working to prevent a review of social revolutionary amendments and the legislation. So that was his statesmanship. In the beginning, if all of you remember, what Nehru said while introducing the first amendment. He said it may be imperfect. We may have committed mistakes. We are bound to be corrected. I am not sure whatever I am saying is entirely correct. I am reminded of a statement of an old Jew from Galicia. Galicia is an autonomous place within Spanish Republic. About 2.7 million people. That old man says, I quote and end the lecture. When someone is honestly 55% right, that's very good. And there is no use of angry. And if somebody is 60% right, it's wonderful. It's a great luck. And let him thank God. But what is to be said about 75% right? Wise people say this is suspicious. Yeah, about it is 75% right. This is suspicious. Well, and what about the 100% right? Whoever says he is 100% right is a fanatic, a thug, and worst kind of bastard. These are not my words. These are the words of an old Jew from Galicia. Their place still exists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Very wonderful and thought-provoking lecture. Now we understand, sir, why people are chanting your name, even in the parliament also. Generally, there will be a rule in the parliament that, you should not take names of persons not presented in the parliament. But probably they must have desired to be there in the parliament, Sudarshan Reddy, every day they are taking your name. Sir, thank you, sir. Thank you for giving a very insightful details of making the parliament, as well as the efforts of breaking the parliament. This is very apt kind of inaugural lecture. Now, Professor Prabhat Patnaik is ready, but to facilitate Sudarshan Reddy sir, as yesterday I was talking to him, he said he may or may not come here because of his health condition situation. And then I promised him, sir, will take your address prior to our regular procedure. So we violated that procedure and we placed him as the first speaker. Now we start, from the beginning. So now I request the person behind this entire idea, Dr. Patta Venkateshwarlu, is lecturer economics at Chenchalguda College, to tell us about the idea of this conference and the idea of this seminar and future plan of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ganta Chakrapani garu. Former Justice of Supreme Court, Sudarshan Reddy garu, Professor Pushpa Chakrapani garu, my co-partner Krishna Reddy garu, guest and speakers. This is my small note about the seminar. Before going to the seminar topic, it is important for us to know what kind of society we intended to build in our country after independence. For this, two important policy resolutions appear significant to me. One is 1948 and 1956 Industrial Policy Resolution. Second one is the Constitution of India. Both of these seem to be the reflection of the aspirations of the freedom struggle as well as the social liberation movements from Pune to Ambedkar. But the 1991 industrial policy or reforms are completely different from the earlier industrial policy resolutions. Before knowing how they are different, we must examine the previous industrial policy resolution, especially the 1956 Industrial Policy Resolution declared the Indian economic system as a socialist pattern of society. That is, all basic industry should be in the public sector. And even those in private sector should be nationalized if needed. Once again, I repeat, those in private sector should be nationalized if needed. This is time of 1956. From this perspective, it is evident that even before incorporating the word of socialism in the preamble of the Constitution, through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976, the 1948 and 1956 Industrial Policy Resolution had already declared India economic system as a socialist system. However, the economic reforms that came into force in 1991 brought policies that were contrasting their industrial policy framework. This included reducing the public sector or privatizing it, introducing disinvestment in public sector enterprises, opening doors to the foreign investment,
abolishing the MRTP Act that was controlling the accumulation of wealth in the hands of industrial families and implementing policies that gradually placed in the economy under private control. I am not against the changes and reforms, but those changes should be based on the Constitution, because the Constitution is a basic political document. Before examining economic reforms, it is essential to understand what the Constitution itself states. The preamble in the Constitution promises social, economic, and political justice to every citizen and aims to ensure equality of status of opportunity. This establishes social justice as a fundamental objective of the Constitution. According to Supreme Court, in the Keshwananda Bharati versus Union of India case, the preamble is a part of the Constitution and emphasized its utmost importance. It had also said that the Constitution must be interpreted in the light of the ideals expressed in the preamble. In the Constitution, several articles were written in accordance with the objective in the preamble. For instance, the directive principle of the state policy stands as the foundation for the country political governance. What do they say? Article 38(1) says that the social system should be changed to promote the welfare of the people. Article 38(2) says effort should be made to reduce income inequalities between individuals and between classes. Similarly, Article 39(a) says that the right to livelihood should be provided to citizens without gender discrimination. Hence, Article 39(b) says ownership and control over material resources should be given to the people. Article 39(c) says the economic system should be run in such a way as to decentralize wealth and means of production. In this manner, through several articles, the Constitution for the first time laid the foundation of social equality against the caste-based social discrimination and inequalities that have been continuing historical for ages. Therefore, Marxist economist Professor Ramat Patnaik described the enactment of Constitution as a social revolution. In this context, I have some questions. Do the economic reforms introduced in 1991 uphold the objective and spirit of the Constitution? What has been their impact over more than 4 decades of implementation? What has been experienced in achieving economic, political, and social justice for the citizen as per the Constitution? Article 21, which is intended for the citizens to live with dignity. Article 47, which says that government should provide nutritious food to promote the health of the people. And Article 38 and 39, which advocates reducing income inequalities among the people, being implemented, or are they coming into force? The Supreme Court and the High Courts, which have the responsibility to protect the Constitution, are they functioning independently? Once again, are they functioning independently? Raising these questions itself as the constitutional base. Therefore, this two-day national seminar is intended to re-evaluate the situation after 76 years of the constitution and the impact the implementation of economic reforms based on the constitution itself. I am confident that the deliberations and discussions over these 2 days will provide deep insights and meaningful suggestions for strengthening the constitutional values in the era of economic reforms. I extended a warm welcome to all the distinguished speakers, delegates, and participants. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Mr. Director of the seminar, you mentioned about 56 must be discussed. One is the Reserve Bank of India was nationalized even before the Constitution came into force. Which became the State Bank of India. And third thing, Planning Commission of India came into existence within 1 month of the Constitution came into force. Sometime 18th February or whatever it is, I don't remember. 1950, the Planning Commission was entrusted with this job of planning the economy, keeping in view the directive principles of the state policy. That is the sequence. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Patta. Now I request Professor Pushpa Chakrapani, Director Academic, to give her message.
Very good afternoon to all of you. It's already 1 o'clock.
Please be brief.
Yes, sir. I'll be very brief. Respected Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Ganta Chakrapani, President of today's program, and esteemed Chief Guest, Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy Garu, a renowned academician and economist, Professor Prabhat Patnaik, who joined online, Professor Venkateshwarlu, Director of the seminar, Professor Krishna Reddy, Head Department of Economics, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, other distinguished guests, respected academicians, and our friends, Dr. K. Srinivas Garu, former editor and also veteran journalist, and other academicians from different parts of the institution, and also particularly Degree College, Chenchalguda, and our own university, and dear students, I welcome you once again for this national seminar. I'm happy to participate in this national seminar organized as a part of the Social Empowerment Week organized by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University from April 5th to 14th of this month. On occasion of to commemorate the birth anniversaries of great social reformers, Babu Jagjeevan Ram, Jyotiba Phule, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. This celebration is not merely commemorative. As a direct academic, I feel it is reaffirmation of our collective efforts and commitment towards the social justice, equality, and inclusive development. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Professor Patta Venkateshwarlu Garu, Director of this seminar, Government Degree College, Chenchalguda, for organizing this timely and relevant seminar in collaboration with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. I also extend my appreciation to Professor Krishna Reddy, Head Department of Economics, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, for bringing such an important academic event to our university. The theme of today's national seminar, Economic Reforms and Indian Constitution, Conflicts, Contradictions, and the Way Forward, is extremely significant in the present context. Whenever we speak about the economic reforms, we often begin with 1991. It is also important to remember that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had envisioned an appropriate economic framework for India decades ago. In fact, this seminar, through this seminar, we are revisiting the very fundamental question raised by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Can political democracy survive without economic justice? The economic reforms introduced in 1991 transformed India's economy. Very true. But unfortunately, they also altered the core philosophy of social justice and envisioned in our constitution. The increasing emphasis on the private sector and market-driven policies widen the gap between poor and rich, and this inequality is particularly visible in the field of education, especially in higher education. Gradually, the education became more accessible to only the privileged sections, while large sections of the society for economically disadvantaged communities faced barriers to entry into higher education sector. Sir, at this crucial juncture, open universities emerged as powerful instrument of social empowerment. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University takes pride in its mission, reaching the unreached. So far, the university has enrolled nearly 2.5 million learners, primarily from marginalized and disadvantaged sections of the society, including women. And more than 1 million learners have successfully completed their higher education at an affordable cost. This reflects exactly the true spirit of Ambedkar's vision, education as a tool for social empowerment. Over a period of time, the expanding market economy has introduced new challenges, particularly in the name of employability skills. Recognizing this reality, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University has taken several proactive initiatives to ensure that our learners remain competent and confident participation in the evolving job market. Sir, we have developed employability framework with the support of Commonwealth of Learning Canada, SEMCA, New Delhi, for to integrating this employability framework in our curriculum. We also introduced stipend-based education in collaboration with Retailers Association Skill Council of India, RASI, enabling our learners to earn while they learn. Sir, we also designed a course Job Achievers program through collaboration with the TCS IAM, preparing our learners for emerging job seekers, job roles. And also to promote women entrepreneurship, we also partnered with BHub, a government-supported incubation center located in our own campus. As an inclusive measure, we introduced several initiatives in align with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's vision of equity. They are Nipuna fellowships to enable the skill development among disadvantaged learners. And also we have introduced very interesting scheme that is Samatha Friendship. This provides free education to the primitive tribal communities, Adivasis and transgender learners, ensuring equal access to higher education. Over the past 1 year, the university has implemented several empowerment-oriented policies aimed at bridging the social and economic gaps and bringing those affected by these economic reforms into the mainstream of the development. So as our universities and also education institutions, it is our responsibility to keep these conversations alive, to revisit once again Ambedkar's idea and question our assumptions and guide public discourse with knowledge and responsibility. I sincerely hope this seminar will encourage meaningful dialogue and help us rediscover the relevance of Ambedkar's economic vision in shaping a more just and balanced future for India. Thank you, and I wish the seminar very fruitful deliberations. Thank you, and thank you once again.
Thank you, Professor Pushpa. Now, actually, the keynote speaker is waiting. I'd like to invite Dr. Uma Devi from Government Degree College, Chenchal to introduce briefly chief guest, keynote speaker.
Dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, distinguished guests, and dear students, good afternoon. It's my proud privilege to introduce Professor BRAOU Patnaik, an Indian Marxian economist. Political commentator, was born on 19 September 1945 in Jatni, Odisha. He obtained his BA Economics honors from the St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and ranking first in the first class. And also he got his Bachelor's of Philosophy and Doctors of Philosophy in 1969 from Oxford University. Professor BRAOU Patnaik has taught at the Center of Social Sciences at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, from 1974 to until his retirement in 2010. He was the Vice Chairman of Kerala State Planning Board from 2006 to 2011. His specialization is macroeconomics and political economy, areas in which he has written numerous influential books and articles. Some of his books include Time, Inflation and Growth in 1988, Economics and Egalitarianism in 1990, Whatever Happened to Imperialism and Other Essays in 1995, Accumulation and Stability Under Capitalism in 1997, The Retreat is Unfreedom 2003, The Value of Money in 2008. Re-envisioning Socialism in 2011 and other essays. And there are so many articles and books where he has contributed and authored. So I have mentioned only a few. So he's also an editor of the journal Social Scientist. He was part of the 4-member high-power task force of the United Nations to recommend reform measures for the global financial system. He is well known as a social scientist of Marxist-Leninist persuasion. Professor Patnaik has been awarded for his work by different associations and schools. In 2012, he was awarded Honorary Doctor of Science in Economics from School of Oriental and African Studies at University of London. He also delivered the prestigious Professor Baidyanath Misra Endowment Lecture of the Orissa Economics Association. In 2012, he has been selected for the 2022 Malcolm Adiseshaya Award for his contributions to development studies as an outstanding economist. He is married to Professor Utsa Patnaik, who is also a Marxist economist. And Professor Patnaik has achieved international acclaim with his incisive analysis of economics and politics. And he is one of the most widely respected scholars of political economy and Marxist public intellectuals. And Emeritus Professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, who extended his services till 2025, even after his retirement. Thank you very much. Now this is time for Professor BRAOU Patnaik.
Yeah, thank you. Now I request Professor Patnaik to deliver keynote address.
Distinguished members of the audience, distinguished dignitaries, thank you very much for asking me to deliver the keynote address. And I'd like to thank Professor Uma Devi for the very kind words that she used in introducing me. From the very beginning, there was a contradiction underlying the Indian Constitution, which Dr. Ambedkar himself had drawn attention to in his concluding remarks in the Constituent Assembly. You see, the 1931 Karachi Congress resolution for the first time, had laid down before the country what exactly a future independent India would look like. That resolution had been moved by Jawaharlal Nehru, and the resolution had been carefully scrutinized by Gandhiji himself, and it represented at that time more or less a certain common position of the entire anti-colonial struggle on what the future of the country should look like, what India in the future should look like. And that resolution suggested a number of things: universal adult franchise, equality before law, irrespective of gender, caste, and so on. Yeah, that separation of the state from religion, that the state shall have no religion, which is basically the essence of secularism, etc. That at the same time, alongside this kind of political vision, it also had suggested a number of economic ideas which should be incorporated into the future of India. And those ideas included state ownership of key industries, state ownership of transport, of essential services, and so on. Now, therefore, there was an integrated approach to the political vision of India and the economic vision that the 1931 Karachi Congress resolution had laid down. Even when the Constituent Assembly met for the constitutional discussions and formulations, Jawaharlal Nehru's opening address enjoined upon the Constituent Assembly not just a set of political ideas to be incorporated into the Constitution, but also a set of economic ideas. But when the Constitution actually came out, while the political ideas, such as a set of fundamental political rights, equality before law, universal adult franchise, and so on, were incorporated into the Constitution, all the economic ideas were put into the directive principles of state policy, which were not really binding on the state. They were more in the nature of really pious wishes, in the sense that if the state violated the directive principles, then of course nobody could take the state to the court. Now, there are some jurists, Justice Sawant, for instance, who are of the view that actually the directive principles also are subject to the courts, in other words, jurisdiction of the courts. But this is not a view that is generally held among jurists. As a result, we had this dichotomy in the Constitution where the economic vision was really more a pious wish, while the political vision was incorporated into the framework of the Constitution itself. Dr. Ambedkar, as I mentioned, in his concluding speech to the Constituent Assembly, drew attention to this contradiction and also made very clear that unless the economic vision, progress is made towards realizing the economic vision, the political vision that is incorporated into the Constitution would, in fact, over time, get subverted. Now, in the beginning, this contradiction did not really affect very much because, after all, the very people who were responsible for framing the Constitution, who were in the forefront of the anti-colonial struggle, were also people who were leading the government. As a result, you actually had a number of measures being incorporated into the legislation, which actually really certainly promoted a certain egalitarian thrust as far as economic policy was concerned. I know one can make a lot of criticism, one can say that land reforms were not thoroughly carried out and so on, but at the same time, if you look at the statistics, for instance, which the World Inequality Database is now presenting, statistics which are probably the most comprehensive, which are available. Take the metric, for instance, the share of the top 1% in the total national income of the country. The share of the top 1%, which was roughly around 12 to 13% of the national income at the time of independence, came down to 6% by 1982. In other words, there was certainly a move in an egalitarian direction. Since then, it remained stable for a while and has been going up, particularly in the years after the economic reforms, so that today the share of the top 1%, I'm giving figures for 2023, which is the last which are available, the share of the top 1% in national income today is about 23%, which is the highest it has been in the last 100 years. So the level of inequality in India today is higher than it has ever been over the last 100 years, which of course is completely violative of the vision of the Constitution and really puts a question mark over and in fact challenges seriously the political vision enshrined in the Constitution of a democracy of equals. In fact, the level of inequality is so great that many people have argued quite convincingly that even absolute poverty, defined as by the Planning Commission itself, the erstwhile Planning Commission, its incidence has gone up. The erstwhile Planning Commission defined absolute poverty in 1973-74, when poverty studies began in the country, as in rural areas not having access to 2,200 calories per person per day, and in urban areas not having access to 2,100 calories per person per day. If you look at the proportion of the population that is below these calorie norms, then in rural areas in 1993-94, 58% of the population was below these norms, and in 2011-12, this had gone up to 68%. In urban India, the proportion had gone up from 57% to 65% over these years. By 2017-18, rural poverty defined in this particular manner had actually gone up to over 80%. In fact, those figures were so startling that the government actually withdrew them from the public domain and changed the method of obtaining data in a manner which actually makes subsequent years not comparable to the figures of the earlier period. Subsequent years meaning again 2022-23. So the point is that that not only has inequality increased dramatically, but even the level of absolute poverty defined as by the Planning Commission in 1973-74, if we remain committed to that definition, even the level of absolute poverty has actually increased. The fact that this has happened, especially as I mentioned, the years I'm quoting are years of the economic reforms. The fact that this has happened in the years of the economic reforms is not an accident. It is something which is immanent, which is in the nature of the economic reforms themselves. Why do I say that? The fundamental world situation in the context which the reforms have been formulated is one in which capital has become globally mobile, and that is in fact supposed to be the rationale of the reforms, that look, if we leave our doors open for foreign investment to come in, then they're going to locate plants in our country, as indeed they're locating in East Asia, locating in other countries of the third world. And if they do so, then we would be able to get the latest technology, we would be able to accelerate the rate of accumulation in the country and therefore obtain a high rate of growth. Therefore, the fact that capital has become globalized is something which is essential to the rationale of the economic reforms. But while capital has become globalized, labor continues to be organized along national lines, because of which, for instance, the strength of the trade unions in the advanced capitalist countries has gone down greatly. According to Joseph Stiglitz, a very well-known economist who actually got the Nobel Prize in economics, Joseph Stiglitz shows that the real wage of an average male American worker in 2011 was marginally lower than the real wage of an average male American worker in 1968. Obviously, real wage had gone up, but has gone down because of the weakness that the workers now have if they go on a strike demanding higher real wages. In that case, capital says, their employers would say, oh, you're going on strike. We are going to locate our plant in Indonesia. We're going to locate our plant in Bangladesh, where labor is cheaper. So the point is that in the advanced capitalist countries, workers have lost out because of this mobility of capital. In the third world countries, in countries like India and Indonesia and China and Vietnam, to which capital is moving, you actually should be, therefore, having a higher level of real wages, a rising real wages, because your labor reserves, what Marx had called the reserve army of labor, the mass of unemployed, uh, should actually be diminishing. And if that is the case, then of course there should be tightness in the labor market, and therefore you should be having increasing real wages. But the ironic fact is that even as the real wages in the advanced countries don't rise because of the fact that now those real wages get tied to the labor reserves of the third world, these labor reserves do not shrink. They do not shrink because of the fact that competition between countries in the neoliberal era gives rise to a much more rapid rate of technological progress, giving rise to a much more rapid rate of labor productivity growth. Now, the rate of growth of employment is just the difference between the rate of growth of output and the rate of growth of labor productivity. So even in countries like India, where presumably the GDP growth rate has increased, there's some doubts about it, but let us accept that it has increased in the neoliberal period. There has been such an increase in the labor productivity growth rate that employment growth actually has marginally come down relative to the pre-neoliberal period. And if employment growth does not increase, then you find that the labor, and if employment growth even comes down, then you find that the labor reserves, that the huge amount of unemployed, underemployed workforce that existed at the time of independence because of the colonial deindustrialization and the colonial drain of surplus from the country, is those labor reserves relative to the workforce, instead of coming down, they even increase. And this is exactly what has happened. So the increase in labor reserves keeps down real wages in the third world, and in the advanced countries, the real wages are kept down because of the fact that now those workers are also tethered to the labor reserves in the third world. So you have this situation where, taking the world as a whole, the vector of real wages really does not increase. China is an exception to this, but the reason why real wages in China have increased over this period is because of state policy, not because of demand and supply, not because of trade union action, but because of the directive of the state, which has actually increased the real wages to a certain extent. Now, if real wages, therefore, more or less do not increase, while the labor productivity is rising, not only in the world as a whole, but within particular countries too, then of course the income inequality would increase. The share of economic surplus, which is really the difference between labor productivity and the real wage, is something which actually rises over time as a proportion of output. And this is the basic reason why inequality is increasing and would continue to increase, because this, as I have been arguing, is actually ingrained in the neoliberal economic policies. Now, it is so kind of obvious that different political formations in India, including even the ruling political party, which originally had expressed itself against making transfers to the workforce, they called it freebies, that why should we give freebies, they're a waste. Even they have been feeling compelled to make some transfers to the workforce. Transfers not just in money terms, because after all, there is an electoral democracy, there are electoral compulsions, but transfers even in real terms. For instance, this whole idea of 5 kilograms of free food grains being given every month to about 80 crores households until 2027. So these transfers, while they have not negated the tendency towards growing income inequality and even growing poverty, perhaps, though obviously, as I said, data for the later period when the 5 kilos started being given are not available because the method of obtaining data have been changed. Nonetheless, you find that this has been one of the factors which has kept people, enabled people to keep their heads over the water. Now, the point is that these transfers, however, are fundamentally of a kind which is, which is deleterious to the status of citizens. Why is it the case? First, of course, these transfers are in the nature of gifts from the government. They're interpreted as largesse, that we have given you all this transfer, we have given you 5 kilos of food grains, therefore vote for us. So it is not a matter in which the dignity of citizenship demands that these transfers be made, but the kindness of the government or the kindness of this or that political formation, which actually makes it possible that these transfers be made. Therefore, these transfers are diminishing the dignity of the citizens because of the fact that they are, as it were, ad hoc measures which are undertaken by different state government, different political formations, the central government, and so on. The second thing, of course, they are all targeted. And in any targeted scheme, it is perfectly possible, in fact, it's more than possible, it's probable that you'd miss out some of the people who are deserving. You'd be surprised to know that there was a time, for instance, when rationing, distribution of food grains was on the basis of targeting, and in the Dharavi slums in Bombay, which were the largest slum cluster in the entire Asia, there were only 120 ration card holders. Obviously, the targeted rationing scheme had missed out large numbers of potential beneficiaries. That's true of all targeted schemes. And the third problem with these transfers, with this theory that we are going to give you transfers and so on, is the fact that it depends on the fiscal situation. Years in which you have resources available with the government are years in which these transfers are given. But on the other hand, years in which, let us say, you find some fiscal stress, these transfers can be cut down. So they are subject to withdrawal at any moment. I would suggest that, therefore, one way in which the basic contradiction underlying the Constitution should be filled, should be overcome, is by actually introducing a set of fundamental economic rights. In other words, we now have political rights, civil rights, but let us introduce a set of fundamental economic rights. Now, can we afford to do that? We made some calculations. If we have simply 5 fundamental economic rights that are introduced, and these 5 are the right to food, which basically means providing food not just to a targeted BPL population, but to everybody, providing food exactly on the same terms as the targeted BPL population was getting in the years before the pandemic. The right to employment, and failing employment, the provision not of an unemployment allowance, but of a full wage, which is a philosophical recognition of the fact that if a person is unemployed, then that unemployment is not his fault, but that unemployment is the fault of the social arrangement in which he happens to live. A right to employment in that sense, a right to free universal health care through a national health service, not through an health insurance, but through a national health service, as you have in Britain, as you had in the Soviet Union, as you have in a number of Scandinavian countries. A right to free, quality, universal education, not just up to school level, but even college education, which is provided by the government, for which the costs are borne by the government. And of course, a right to non-contributory pensions and disability benefits, pensions for the elderly, non-contributory, and disability benefits, which are a living pension. You'd be surprised to know that at the moment, the central government's pension scheme, non-contributory pension scheme, is to the tune of 200 rupees per month, which is ridiculous. It's a joke. So a living pension, and together with corresponding disability benefits, from which those who are on various pension schemes, like for instance private employers and so on, have their own pension schemes, or government itself has for particular occupations pension schemes, they can opt out. But to those who are not under any pension scheme, you actually have a non-contributory pension together with disability benefits. Just let's have these 5 rights. These 5 fundamental economic rights, which would go a long way in transforming this country into a welfare state. These 5 rights would cost, in addition to whatever is being provided under various heads at the moment towards these particular ends, they would cost an additional 10% of the country's GDP. Now, in order to provide this additional 10% of the country's GDP, you need to raise resources, which are not 10% of GDP, but you need to raise resources roughly around 7% of GDP, because some of the expenditure comes back to you in the form of taxation. 6 2/3% of GDP. That's basically our rough calculation. The 6 2/3% of GDP can be mobilized by just imposing just two taxes on only the top 1% of the population. One is a 2% wealth tax, and the other is a 1/3 inheritance tax. Now, let me say a little bit about this inheritance tax. Those who defend capitalism, even the philosophers who defend capitalism, do so on the grounds that the capitalists earn an income, not, as Karl Marx had said, through the extracting a surplus value from the workers, but they earn an income because they have some special quality. And the income they earn is in fact a reward for that quality. Let us accept that argument momentarily. If we accept that argument, then the children of the capitalists must also show the same quality before they get entitled to actually draw an income. Therefore, in some sense, the philosophical justification for capitalist income contradicts the inheritance of this income by the children, which is why in a number of advanced capitalist countries, you have very high rates of inheritance taxation, particularly in the form of death duties. For instance, in Japan, you have 55% of wealth that is taken away at the death of a person. In Britain and in the United States, you have 40%, which is taken away at the death of a person. I'm suggesting only a 1/3 inheritance taxation, namely that whenever a person dies, or if a person is transferring his or her wealth to progeny before when he's alive, then 1/3 of it should be taken away by the state. If you just have 1/3 inheritance taxation along with 2% wealth taxation, it is amazing that in India there is no wealth taxation. 2% wealth taxation, which is really, and only on the top 1% of the population, both these taxes, only on the top 1% of the population, then you would be able to raise 6 2/3% of GDP in the form of additional resource mobilization, and that would be quite enough to convert this country into a welfare state. Of course, I'm aware of the fact that finances are not enough. For instance, if you have a right to food, then not only must you have the finances with the government with which this food can be distributed to the population, but you must also have the food. So the real economy also needs to be changed. And the real economy is made to adjust. The financial resources are always there. And of course, the real resources have to be found through an adjustment in the economic arrangement that we have, in the production structure that we have. Now, of course, in order to do that, the moment, as I said, the moment you impose a wealth taxation or you impose inheritance taxation, you would have capital flight. Capital would move out of your country because then, foreign capital would start getting worried that, look, you have all kinds of leftists taking over power. Similarly, domestic capital would get worried. It would say that, look, let us go and invest in Mauritius, or let's go and invest in Cayman Island or somewhere else. And as a result, you'd have capital flight. So no, that's obvious. I mean, that's something which has happened to all countries, even before any such taxation has been imposed. In South Africa, when the apartheid government ended and Nelson Mandela became the president, there was so much capital flight that Nelson Mandela appointed as his finance minister the same person who had been the finance minister under the apartheid government. So the fact of capital flight is something that we have to reckon with. But of course, if there are capital flights, in that case, you would have to have capital controls. If you have capital control, that is controls on outflows of finance, outflows of investment, in that case, then you would not have enough finance in order to meet your trade deficit. If you cannot meet your trade deficit, then of course you do have to have trade controls. So you would have to respond to the kind of challenges that a movement towards a welfare state would place before the government by taking appropriate measures. When you take these appropriate measures, you would find that you are no longer in a neoliberal economy. Essence of neoliberalism consists in relatively unrestricted flows of commodities and of capital across country borders. Now, of course, President Trump has actually done away with this kind of neoliberalism by imposing heavy tariffs on all countries. But I don't see why we should continue to remain wedded to a neoliberal economic regime, which is what the economic reforms that the seminar is talking about were concerned with, in a situation where it comes in the way of our vision of a welfare state. So, of course, you would find that therefore there would be opposition from foreign capital, opposition from countries which back the interests of foreign capital. There would be opposition from the domestic big capitalists. There would even be some opposition from the well-to-do segments of the professionals and so on, who would believe that that kind of dissociation from globalized linkages would jeopardize the possibility of their children migrating to greener pastures in the United States or in the European Union, because if it is the case that you actually have all these restrictions, then of course there would not be that kind of freedom of movement that their children have been enjoying till now. So you would have a phalanx of opposition to any move towards a welfare state. But of course, this phalanx of opposition can be overcome if you actually organize the people, if political formations could actually organize the people in order to demand a welfare state. In fact, it is not enough to give them, as it were, doles. If it's not enough to give them what are called freebies, it is very important that their rights are recognized, that their dignity of citizenship, which actually expresses itself not just in a set of fundamental political rights, but also in a set of fundamental economic rights, is something which actually manages to express itself. Now, I know that this is not going to be an easy measure. This is not going to be something which you can, in fact, kind of immediately sort of overnight include, the way you can, for instance, announce that, let us say, all women should be given 1,000 rupees a month. But on the other hand, there is, in my mind, no other way of overcoming the basic contradiction of the Constitution, which has become aggravated in the situation of economic reforms, than by introducing a set of fundamental economic rights, which, as I said, are eminently feasible in terms of the finances, in terms of the real economy. It's perfectly possible to convert this state into a welfare state. I think the people of this country have waited for almost 80 years for an improvement in their condition, which was the promise of the anti-colonial struggle. But I think the time has come to actually redeem that promise. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you for joining us and delivering a very thought-provoking keynote speech. Now I think, it is time for even lunch also. Before we closing, we have a small felicitations to our guests today. I request, PRO, Krishna Reddy, to do the cake.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Contradictions, sir, and Director Kadavil, Director, please felicitate to This is wish the state.
BRAOU-Ji, convener of the seminar, to propose vote of thanks.
Of this session, Professor Ganta Chakrapani Garu, Vice Chancellor, SCMU, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, respected Chief Guest, Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy Garu, distinguished delegates, faculty, researchers, and students. A very good afternoon to you all. It is my privilege and honor to rise and offer this vote of thanks at the conclusion of this enlightening inaugural session. On behalf of Department of Economics, Government Degree College, Chenchalguda, and the Department of Economics, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, we are deeply grateful to Honorable Professor Ganta Chakrapani Garu, Vice Chancellor, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, for gracing this inaugural session as President and for the unwavering the institutional support extended by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University in making this seminar a reality. We express our heartfelt gratitude to Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy, sir, Justice, former Justice of Supreme Court of India, is our chief guest for honoring us with his esteemed presence and for his illuminating the inaugural address. His profound insights into the constitutional jurisprudence and the economic governance have set an inspiring tone for the deliberations ahead. We sincerely thank our dynamic commissioner, Srimati A.C. Devasena, IAS, Commissioner of Collegiate Education, and today's distinguished guest for according permission to conduct this seminar. Madam assured to, due to the some hectic work and meeting with the Principal Secretary, Madam is not attended, didn't attend this inaugural session. Madam assured to join this session any time of these 2 days. As a senior administrator, add this immense value to our discourse. Our warm appreciation goes to the Professor Pushpa Chakrapani Garu, Madam, and Professor Chandra Mukherjee, our guest of honor, today's guest of honor, for their encouragement and gracious participation in the session. My special thanks goes to our Madam Principal, Professor Chandra Mukherjee, without whose support, guidance, and encouragement, this seminar would not have been possible. We are all especially honored by the virtual presence of the Professor Prabhat Patnaik Sir Garu as our keynote speaker. His scholarly immense and decades of critical engagement with questions of economic policy and constitutional values have enriched this seminar immeasurably. I also extend my gratitude to Dr. L.V.K. Reddy Garu, Registrar of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, for your valuable support and guidance. I extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Pallavi Madam, Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, and the Chairperson of the Organizing Committee for her valuable guidance and support. I
I would also like to place on record our sincere thanks to the director and staff of EMR and IRC for their valuable support. I also express our sincere thanks to the PRO branch for their valuable support. I extend my gratitude to the Computer Center and its dedicated technical team for ensuring the seamless technical arrangements. A special word of thanks to Swami for his graphic designing. My heartfelt thanks to the Professor Venkatramana Garu, Dr. Giri, Dr. Mallesh, Dr. Radhakrishna, Dr. Avinash, whose active engagement made this seminar academically vibrant and meaningful. I extend my deep appreciation to my colleague, Professor Patta Venkateshwarlu, Seminar Director, and Professor K. Krishna Reddy, Seminar Co-Director, for their meticulous planning and tireless efforts in the conceptualizing and organizing this national seminar. And I also thank each and every faculty members of the Government Degree College, Chenchalguda, for their support throughout this program. I also thank the entire organizing committee, faculty colleagues, non-teaching staff, and student volunteers whose dedication behind the scenes has ensured the smooth conduct of this event. Finally, I thank every participant, the paper presenters, researchers, and the delegates who have traveled from across the country to contribute these important academic conversations. And also, once again, special thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Ganta Chakrapani Garu, for providing this wonderful opportunity. We sincerely thanking you, sir, for your support and encouragement. We look forward to 2 days of rich and rigorous and productive scholarly exchange. Thank you, one and all. And also now I request, this is the now time for we have a lunch break for half an hour time. Immediately after lunch, we have to gather it for start the technical session. The first technical session, we'll gather here at the same place only. And also, I request you to those who didn't register the registration, they register it may not complete. They may register their